Thanks, guys. Thank you, Tony. Well, I mean, it's either a good or bad thing that you're here, because this is going to be, based on what I've seen the last couple of days, a little bit more unhinged. Could be fun. Good. I'm a long time X World enjoyer. I used to watch lots of things that were coming up on the websites and on the YouTube and stuff. First time here, as Tony said, so first time presenting. I'll do all right. It's going to be short and sweet. We've got a 30-minute slot. I want to leave a lot of time for questions, because there's a lot of weird ways you can use this. But you can always shout out questions. I'm happy to take things on the fly as well. So let's start with a bit of a story. And I was alluding to it a little bit before. My time as a Mac administrator has not always been by the books. It's not always followed, as my friend at Apple would say, best practices. But sometimes a Mac admin has to do the wrong thing for the right reasons. I'm sure we've all been there. How do we solve a dumb problem with an even dumber solution, right? I'll give you a bit of a story. Michael was actually working for the same organization, so you can probably attest to this. But I was placed at a school, and the school was primarily Mac. And you know those really old, dumb, interactive whiteboards that people just thought were normal whiteboards, and they used to write on them, and anyway, I had to install this particular driver on every single computer at the school. All these Macs didn't support the driver. And so I was like, well, look, I'm 18 years old. I consider myself pretty cluey. Let's just boot camp every single Mac at the school. So 100 Macs spread across the whole school, all boot camped. Unactivated versions of Windows, that's okay. And you know what? Staff loved it. Because you got to remember, back then in 2011, most of these staff haven't even seen a Mac before. And so they were using a device they weren't comfortable using, right? So reverting them back to boot camp Mac, they're like, oh, this is great, this is great. Anyway, the state sort of, shush you, the state manager for all the people, IT staff at the school comes over, has a massive meltdown. He's like, why have you done this? Why have you done this? Anyway, long story short, chaotic innovation. And I'm sure there's been times where you guys have had to do something out of the box in order to achieve something that might not be possible technically, might not be best practice either. Now, thankfully, I'm a little bit more refined and controlled in my approach today, just a little bit. But Apple's GPTK interested me, and not for the reasons that, again, it was intended for, right? So why did I dedicate time to GPTK? Well, let's go through this slide super quick. And hands up if you see anything that's slightly familiar to the way that you've worked. There's one already, that's good. So there might be an application, it might be an application that runs your business. There might be an application that pays you all your salary, such as a payroll application. It's not going to be migrated ever because it's being consistently reviewed and it's too risky to migrate. It might have survived an insanely long amount of time. Maybe it's older than the team that's working there. No one knows how to support it, how to deploy it, whatever it is. And obviously it could just be super old. So what this sort of a situation I've encountered multiple times, whether it's a legacy application, obviously Legacy.exe is what we're calling this, but sometimes, a colleague of mine actually highlighted this earlier, it might just be a Windows application, right? It could just be an application that someone wants to use, they're more comfortable using, but they have a Mac. Now, what's the use of a program like device choice, right? We all want to get to device choice. People using comfortable devices, being productive, yada, yada. But what's the point of device choice if there's no app choice, right? So picture this, I've just come to this brand new organization. I'm like, hey, can I have one of those cool Macs over there? Oh, absolutely, we have device choice. But because you are this particular persona, here's your Windows device. But you guys have device choice. Yeah, well, that payroll app that you're using doesn't run on that Mac over there. So that sucks, right? But then what about those organizations, and again, you've probably seen these before, where they have maybe a couple of computers hiding around the corner, hosting one random file share, or hosting one random application, and the auditors come, quick, go turn them off, just hide them over there somewhere, So there could be application, or there could be like legacy hardware facilitating these legacy applications as well. So these sort of blockers I take, chaotic, innovative approaches to. And I guess there is a way to close the gap. And there has been for a few years, to be honest. Like, this isn't a new concept. But I think the way in which it's delivered now is much more robust than it's ever been. So let's look at some of those options. Okay. Totally not sponsored by Monster Energy, by the way. So, going right... Oh, I lost my notes. I wonder why that happened. Give it 1 sec. Oops. Come on. Apologies. All right, let's keep going. So let's go from left to right. So we have virtualization. This is something that is not new. You've used crossover, you've used UTM, you've used parallels, rest in peace boot camp, we were all there. The thing is, this is a massive sort of endeavor for very sort of limited, I guess, use case. So you see there I've got like, you could deploy a VM, you could deploy a parallel environment, and you'd have a 25 gigabyte file or partition on your computer, and you're trying to run some stupid application. Doesn't make the most sense, right? Emulation, things got a little bit more open source, a little bit better. Still not great, right? So we've got tools like Wine, which have been around forever. Tools like Whiskey, which have like wrapped Wine in a nice little interface. The thing is, the way these tools work is via like a really janky, direct API translation. It'll go, this API on Windows, this API on Mac. And it'll just go through it one at a time. And if you update macOS and one of those APIs changes, or if Windows updates, because it does quite frequently, and those APIs change, you're just managing this perpetual monster, which you don't want to do. But it can work if you, take the time and you make the 37 forum posts and you sacrifice a Go. It'll eventually work. But that moves us on to, I guess, the best way, and the most recent way, which is a translation layer. So instead of us emulating those API calls, we can just let the Windows app interact with the hardware, with the tools directly on the Mac. Game porting toolkit. Fun fact, doesn't need to be used for games, which is why I use this translation layer as a means of solving interesting problems. And it's also actually stable and supported. So yeah, call AppleCare if it doesn't work. So I figured, because this is my first presentation, and what can go wrong in a first presentation, I thought I'd do a live demonstration. Now, I was watching everyone else's and they had pre-recorded them, so this makes me a little bit more nervous, but what the hell, we'll go ahead and do that. So let's get out of this for a sec. So I wrote this little project. Essentially what it does, it'll get a Windows application. You can see I've got Firefox 5 and uTorrent there from 2003, I think. It will get that application. It'll bundle it inside an app bundle with all the prerequisites. So you don't have to go installing or configuring GPTK or Wine or any of those things. It'll use this configuration file to determine how Wine and how GPTK operates, which is cool. And then it will also build a package for you. So if you want to deploy this with a single package, using any MDM or USB stick, please no, you can do that, which is cool. So I've got here, there's the script there. I'll call the app Firefox. Oh, you know what? I'll change the name so you know I haven't pre-baked this. What about that? Let's call it Firefox Xworld lol. Firefox 5 is simply the folder here. Now the reason you have to specify folder is because not every Windows application is just a single executable, for instance. Obviously Firefox has a whole bunch of things inside it that you will need to package and you'll need to include in your application. And then finally, the actual EXE file that your application is going to run, because there could be 5 EXEs in that folder, right? So let's go ahead and run that. Cool. Oh man, this is so tense. It's like this worked in the airport, it worked in the hotel. Here I am in a presentation room. Here we go, that's good. So if we were to go just a standard sort of open, I'll go to the build folder. You can see it's actually named it. I didn't bake this. Copy that down here. Open that up. Give it a second. I've did that before. There we go. Cool. And let's bring that here. Here we are. Yay, 2003. Excellent. Now, package itself, I'll also demonstrate. So if we were to, let's just go and open the installer and do the old-fashioned way. Happy days. Ignore that 800 megabytes for a 2003 web browser. We'll talk about that later. Cool. Don't fail me now. We'll edit this in post. It'll be heaps quicker on the video. Don't worry. It'll be fun. Yay. Okay, excellent. Now let's go to applications. That's just the default spot I put this. There it is there. There's one I tested this morning. And same deal. Cool. And here, I have actual Firefox, which is kind of cool. Neither of them will be my primary browser. But this is Firefox version 5, which is, very old. And the reason I use this particular one is because one of my clients, who is actually quite large and stretches multiple states of Australia, have a self-managed database that requires Firefox version 5 specifically, and they weren't upgrading their Macs because they couldn't install it. So, bit of a stopgap, but what version of Firefox are we up to now? 142. So, you can see this might be a good or a bad thing, which kind of is a segue into the remainder of this presentation, right? Let's get rid of this and go back into here. Okie doke. Is this still connected? Let's find out. Yeah, cool. All right. So I said before, Wine in GPTK, it can be altered, it can be configured. I wanted to run through a few of the cool switches that I found. And the way they operate is kind of funny. So we have Wine eSync. Think of it as just like vertical sync. But when I tested this with Adobe Photoshop CS2 and turning this feature on, there was no screen tearing at all when I was editing photos, which is kind of cool. The second one here, which is DirectX Vulkan, so obviously like the graphics runtimes, state cache, it basically just keeps your caches shaded or built or fulfilled, populated, so that you can run applications without them needing to take an excessive amount of time to load. And I tested this one with Counter-Strike 1.6, and it worked perfectly. Now, the next one here, Metal HUD enabled. This is at 0 because I found that when I was loading an application like Microsoft Access, I get an FPS counter up the top, which was super funny. So stupid. And then this one here, Wine DLL overrides. At the moment, I've got this configured so that if you force Windows XP, which is the next one, it's not going to ask you for .NET 2.0 when you're trying to run applications on a brand new computer, which is cool. Alluded to the second one. You can actually specify Wine Windows version as low as Windows 95. I couldn't get it to run in Tahoe, but it actually did run in macOS 14 when GPTK first came out, which is pretty cool. And then the last one, I played around with this, You can force DirectX 12 rendering for any application you run using GPTK. And I tried it using Word 2003. And it ran. But it was like a horrible shade of light blue the entire screen. But it's fun. I mean, you could always try that. So there are some fun things to do. So like, we know this particular thing works. I've proved it here. I've even proved that you can somehow deploy this thing rather easily if you wanted to. So let's go over a few times where this isn't a really bad idea. The first would be life support. So if you have an application that is really old and you're just trying to get it a bit further along before you migrate it to something new, this could be a reasonable option. I've got here in brackets, please replace that app though. Don't just leave it in life support in perpetuity. The next is legacy enjoyers. This one was put here specifically for my grandfather, who prefers Minesweeper on Windows 98 to the new Minesweeper of the updated graphics. So maybe you want to run a specifically old application for no apparent reason. Cost cutting, like, I know we've all been there. Like, do you really want to license Windows for one particular app on one particular computer? I mean, you could leave it unactivated, but then you have other concerns, I suppose, depending on where you are. And my personal favorite one, and I got to shout out colleague David McMonnies for this, excuses as a service, which is the classic, we can't use Macs, this app only runs on Windows. So, I mean, that's kind of what I would suggest. Even then, it's pretty loose. But again, just because we can, doesn't mean we actually should, right? Because we're inherently installing software that is going to pose a vulnerability on that system. It might be fun to run, regedit from Windows 98 on your Mac just to see if it opens. Doesn't mean you really want to. Like the other thing is there's no support for some of these applications anymore. So if you're deploying a legacy application, obviously support might have ended. If you're deploying a Windows application that you just want to use, like you've all heard that thing where like, Outlook in Windows 11 is so much better than Outlook on macOS. There's all these new buttons and I can do my... You could do that. Something goes wrong and you like reach out to Microsoft, they can be like, the hell are you doing, man? Or if you reach out to your MDM provider and be like, hey, this isn't working, then you'd be like, yeah, no, of course it's not working, right? And if you try to look up support online for a legacy app, their website's probably redirecting to some crypto casino now. Their phone numbers are probably all disabled, so you're on your own if you do this, matter of speaking, right? It's definitely not scalable because while you can deploy the application, how do you patch the application? And like patching the application then defeats the purpose of deploying the legacy application. And so by design, this particular implementation is non-compliant, right? So there's no scalability. And then deploying it and having your legacy application run, you've just like forced yourself into this place of technical debt. Because do you think the organization is going to pay the project manager and the business analyst, you as the engineer, maybe a couple of trainers, to support a new app to replace the old one if you've got it working? No, they're just not. They're just not. You're going to be in this like perpetual, like maintaining this kicking a dead horse situation. And so that's kind of like beginning to end what I had planned. From here, it's basically, let me answer your questions if you have them. But I also, actually, you know what I should say? I should say that like I work for Comp now and I do not recommend this. I probably should have led with that. But if you have any questions, let me know. It's been fun to show you some rubbish technology. Yeah, go ahead.
So it didn't work in the Mac version of Firefox 5, right?
No, it doesn't. Not on the latest version of macOS.
No. Oh, no, because like, Firefox 5, I just downloaded but that's the Mac version.
Correct. No, it doesn't work on the Mac version. No, I mean, I'll give you some backstory. So they had about 15... Yeah, hit it.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, repeat the question. Yeah, so we had a person over here download Firefox 5 for macOS and run it on their Mac. and it runs on Sequoia, yeah, which is cool. But it didn't solve the problem for the organization that I was testing for because they relied on the Windows version. Which is good. Good question, though. Good question. Any other questions? Yes?
You mentioned some fun/insane test cases that you put it through.
Yeah.
I don't suppose you went as far as installing something like Unity and then trying to...
Holy shit. All right, I've got to repeat the question. So, gentleman over here has asked some weird test cases specifically involving like graphics processing. He mentioned Unity, like game development tools. I can't say I have, just simply because Unity also works on macOS. I think they have a client. But like, just for like the giggles, I wouldn't mind doing that, to be honest. There have been some pretty crazy use cases, not at Comp now, but in my own testing, where I've like run SQL databases using like an old version of SQL on my Tahoe Mac. You know, obviously did Firefox, which I had to actually test for a client. Thankfully, they decided to upgrade the application when they saw the overhead that was required. I've run Diablo 4 on my Mac, emulating Battle.net, right? I did the Outlook test that Josh was mentioning to me earlier today. So really, like, it's a game porting toolkit, but you can use it for any Windows application, which is super cool. Any other questions?
I just have a really interesting observation, not a question.
Yeah, Tony.
Does anybody remember what wine stands for? Wine is not an emulator.
Wine is not an emulator.
Apple Silicon, guess what wine is?
Wine is an emulator. Yeah. I'll repeat that for the video. But Tony was saying that wine, what it stands for, is wine is not an emulator. But running it on Apple Silicon, indeed, it is an emulator, which is funny. Well, cool. Thanks, everyone. I expected maybe like my Comp Now colleagues to be here. There's a couple of people that I don't know, so thank you for wasting some time with me this hour. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy.